It was all well and good for women to protest that they wanted equality. It was a different matter entirely to alter the institutions that restricted equality. And yet, that was the fearsome task that faced men and women toward the end of the 20th century. The task was complicated by the fact that well-intentioned people didn't always agree about what was fair. Some remained convinced that women's natural roles influenced choices that they made. Growing numbers believed that social influences shaped women's desires. Whatever position you took would determine how you imagined changing institutions and the law in the 70s and into the 80s and beyond. In a decade that began with concern over how to end a war we were losing, that witnessed the shooting deaths of young students protesting the Vietnam War at Kent State University, a decade that watched a president resign in disgrace after violating the norms of fair play and holding himself above the law. In such a decade, preserving values of fairness, of democratic practice, were the top of the agenda. But then economic disaster struck. Productivity among workers declined, the movement of capital abroad accelerated, and with it, manufacturing in the United States stalled and began its precipitous decline. Trade unions could no longer defend jobs from moving abroad. Unemployment reached new and frightening levels, and high inflation eroded living standards. When gasoline prices shot up and long lines at the gas pumps provoked unexpected outbursts of anger, there was little faith left among ordinary people that the country was still working properly. In this context, women's search for equality or rights seemed like mere folly. After all, women who were abandoning their homes in large numbers were at least partially to blame for some of the disasters, so people wondered. There was the urban crisis that had been brought on by policy changes, by redrawing residential lines, by discrimination among banks, by urban renewal, and that had been exacerbated by riots in the 60s. The breakdown of the traditional family, as witnessed by a rising divorce rate, and the disintegration of the single breadwinner family seemed to violate everybody's expectations. And then there was that 1965 immigration law that was changing the face of the nation, opening its doors to more Southeast and East Asian immigrants, to immigrants from the Caribbean, to Latin Americans and Africans. Growing disagreements among African Americans and among women about what was fair also contributed to the confusion of the decade. It was hard to sort out where justice or equity or fairness lay, much less to do something about it. And yet, and still, growing pressure from women turned to creating institutional changes as well as new attitudes.